Thank you, and good morning to everyone that's joining us. I'm currently joining you guys from Calgary, Alberta, though I am originally from Mississauga, Ontario. And just want to give a huge shout out to all my friends that might be from the Mississauga or GTA area. I really, today's really reflection for me on how far things have come in terms of my own personal journey. And I wanted to share some of that journey with you today. And so part of that journey will be through narrative and sharing stories of personal things that have happened in my life, my family's life, coming as immigrants to this country. But also what I want to do is share a little bit of my art form, which is spoken word poetry. So I wish I could get a show of hands here, just out of curiosity. Who here, if you want to just raise your hand, is familiar with spoken word poetry? Do you want to just give me like a virtual raising of the hand if you're familiar with the art form, spoken word poetry? Okay, seems like we've got a couple of hands. Amazing. So for those of you who might not know what spoken word is, it's almost like hip hop music, but taking the beat or the instrumental away. And the focus with spoken word most of the time is very much on narrative, storytelling, talking about lived experience. And so that's really what I want to start today with and set the tone. And so the poem that I want to start by sharing is a poem that I wrote just about 4 or 5 months ago. It was Mother's Day of this year, and Mom had joined me at a presentation that I was doing to a bunch of middle school students in Brampton, Ontario. And so she was sitting front row, my mom's sitting front row, and there's 300 students behind her. And so I told her to come. I just wanted her to hear me speak and present to the youth in the room. But little did she know that during that presentation, I was going to surprise her with a poem that I had written particularly for her. And so I want to start by sharing that poem today and just reflecting on all that moms do, especially immigrant moms, for their children. So this poem is called Dear Mama, and I hope you all enjoy it. Here's how it goes. Dead in the winter, we were new to this country. $5 in your pocket with a kid who was hungry. Not a clue what to do, not a clue where to go. We were stuck in the snow, freezing 30 below. When it was time to go to school, I had a secondhand pack. Every day was a struggle, and I saw you break your back. Without a coat to keep you warm, you'd walk with me. Oh, there's my alarm going off for joining this meeting. I'll start that from the top. Then in the winter, we were new to this country. $5 in your pocket with a kid who was hungry. Not a clue what to do, not a clue where to go. We were stuck in the snow, freezing 30 below. When it was time to go to school, I had a secondhand pack. Every day was a struggle, and I saw you break your back. Without a coat to keep you warm, you'd walk with me through the snow. When we ate, you didn't, but you made sure we didn't know. But I knew, because I'd walk to the fridge when I was hungry for more and see nothing inside when I opened the door. No sleep from the stress or from working long days. Tell me how you did it, because I'm truly still amazed. I know parents worked hard, but I saw you work double, only for me to get older and get myself in trouble. You left everything behind to give a future to your son, only for police to come and ask about the things he may have done. You loved me and held me, even when I drove you wild. You taught me the sacrifice required to be a parent to a child. And so when I become a father, I know exactly what to do to try and be a parent that is even half of you. Thank you for listening, everyone. I hope you enjoyed that. That is spoken word poetry. Thank you, Jody. I appreciate it. And so my poem for my mom, as you can imagine, in front of 300 students, there was a lot of emotions. For my mom, she was, very lost for words. And I stopped the presentation and I hugged her and I told the 300 kids that were there in that room that, we can never really thank our parents enough. And everything I shared in that poem is based on real life, real personal lived experience. You know, when we talk about coming to Canada with $5 in our pocket or not having a coat in the middle of the Canadian winter, that is reality. And it's not just for me and my family or my mother, but for so many immigrant families that come to this country seeking a better future, seeking a new home, looking for new opportunities. And that struggle is so real. And that financial struggle is only one part of it, one piece of it, right? There's the very clear language barrier that often some immigrants will come with. There's a very clear cultural barrier coming from different countries in the world, so on and so forth. Like the list goes on, right? And this was our journey. This poem, in a nutshell, was our journey and our struggle together. And there's a couple of stories from this that I want to elaborate on. You know, but when it first started, I remember coming to Canada. I was about 3 or 4 years old, and one of my first memories of growing up here in Southern Ontario was taking the TTC with my mom. And this is a very simple thing, but it just really goes to show how deep the immigrant struggle really is. My mom had a doctor's appointment. I was probably about 5 or 6 years old at this point, and she had a doctor's appointment. And she didn't know how to get there. So she's taking the bus for the first time on the TTC, and she pays her, you know, $2.50 or whatever at the time for her fare. She gets off the bus and she gets a transfer and she pays another $2.50 for her fare, plus my fare. And then she takes a third transfer, does it again. She gets to the doctor's, goes to her appointment. She's trying to go back home, and now she's worried because she doesn't have enough money to get back. And so she's a little nervous. She's crying. She's worried. We didn't have cell phones back then. So the bus comes and she asks the bus driver, like, listen, I just paid all my money to get here. I paid 3 times to take the bus, TTC, to get to my doctor appointment. I don't have money to get back. He said, ma'am, when did you take the bus? She said, just an hour ago. And the bus driver said, ma'am, you know, you could have taken a transfer that would have given you 2 hours grace period to take the transit wherever you'd like. Something as simple as that broke my mother to tears. She just didn't know. This wasn't the reality for her. Didn't know how things worked around here. This was a completely new environment. And so those memories and those moments, those emotions come to mind. Seeing my mom be very nervous, seeing those tears flow down her cheeks, seeing her worry about money, seeing her worry about how things are going to get done. That was how the early years went for me. And I remember as a young kid that it wasn't just these things. Again, as I mentioned, it was the massive cultural struggle, the language barrier that existed. Sometimes even simply asking basic questions could become difficult, or identifying to the doctor what your pain was could become difficult, right? These little things were highlighted over and over and over in my early years. So let's fast forward a couple years. Wali's in high school now, and we moved to Mississauga. And one of the big things with me as a teenager was really trying to find my place. Because I was one of those kids that was kind of lost in between two worlds, as a lot of immigrant kids are, right? So you have one side of you, which is like, okay, I grew up in Canada. I'm in Canada. I'm a Canadian kid through and through, which is really how I feel. But then there's that part of you that's like, no, wait, I have roots somewhere else. But the ironic thing is that if I was to go back to Pakistan, I would never really be one of them either. So I'm kind of lost in between. I get bullied at school for not being Canadian enough, but if I was to go to Pakistan, I'd not be Pakistani enough. So where exactly am I in this spectrum? I'm kind of somewhere in between, and I'm lost. And I think that confusion and that place in the middle where I was trying to find myself was, how do I bridge these two worlds? And I think that gets lost in translation. Has anyone in the room kind of been in that situation? If you want to just give me a raise of hands, anyone that comes from an immigrant family themselves that maybe has experienced that, right? So I'm not the only one, right? So a couple of people have sort of gone through this exact phenomenon. And I think one thing that happens when you go through something like this is that you really want to find your place and you want validation. And so that's when things really took a turn for the worst. It was when I was 15 years old that police had come to the lobby of our apartment building in Mississauga. after an altercation had broken out in our building, which I was involved in. The police officer that had come to the building was questioning me in the lobby of the building. And he took maybe 20 seconds. Didn't really hear out my side of the story. 20 seconds before he said, "Put your hands behind your back." And I will never forget the sound of the click of the handcuffs as they tied my wrists together. The cop escorted me through the front doors and pushed me into the back of the cruiser. And I remember very vividly, as the cruiser door was closing, I turned my head to my right, and directly in front of me to the right side were a pair of elevator doors. So you can imagine the cruiser door is closing on one side. I'm turned to my right while I'm in the back of this cruiser at 15 years old. The elevator doors are opening at the same time. And as those elevator doors open, I look directly into the eyes of my mom. And that was a very pivotal moment for me, because I saw her world shatter in that moment. The officer making the arrest at this point had already made his way to the front of the car, and he's pulling out. He's ready to go. Mom's trying to run out and chase the car, and I can't turn because it's extremely cramped back in the back of a cruiser, but I can hear her even though I can't turn my body. And I hear her saying, "Where's my son going? Give me my son back." Those words will be etched in my mind forever. And I think about how much struggle my family had to go through, my mother had to go through, my father had to go through, for that to be the outcome of their hard work and their sacrifice. And I had time to think about that. But I was really one of the lucky ones. Honestly, truly very lucky. Because I had a lot of people who cared. And there's two people I want to particularly make note of. One was a high school teacher. The teacher who just said, "Hey, Wally, how's it going? What's happening with you? Tell me about what's been going on. I see you walking with your hoodie up and your head down." That teacher made a huge difference in my life. Her name was Miss Riley. I want to say a huge thank you to Miss Riley for being that mentor. And the second person was a counselor who worked at a youth agency that was funded by United Way. And he was, one of the first men that I could really have open conversations about what it means to be a man and how you don't need to seek validation from other men by getting in trouble or acting out or behaving a certain way. That's very toxic. There wasn't a lot of people that I could talk to openly like that. And to be honest, my father was always working, so I never had that relationship with him to have these conversations. Immigrant struggle. So this was the first time in my life that I was actually opening up to someone, opening up to these two people, teacher and a counselor, Miss Riley and Darren. First people in my life that I honestly felt like I could have an authentic conversation with about what I was going through. And that was when I was 15. And so that's when things started to change. But obviously that change takes time. I was never really a great student. And one of the things about being from an immigrant family is their expectations are sky high for immigrant kids, right? Especially if you come from the South Asian community, then it's even higher, right? So if you had 80s in school, the first question that your parents had when it was report card day was, "Why is this an 80 and where's the other 20% gone?" That was their first response. And so growing up with that mentality, growing up with that struggle, was an added pressure for me. But I, worked really, really hard my last couple of years of high school. So grade 12 comes around. I'm about to graduate, high school, and I'm looking at the future. And so I applied to universities. Really didn't think I was going to get it, but I was hustling that year. And so I'm checking the mail in the lobby of my apartment building where we lived in Mississauga. Same lobby I got arrested in just a few years back. So I'm checking the mail. And as I open the mailbox, I see a letter. The letter says University of Toronto, and it's got my name on it, Wali Shah. I'm like, okay, I guess this is an early rejection letter from U of T to let me know I'm nowhere near getting it. But to my surprise, I opened that letter in the lobby of my building. and it said that I'd gotten accepted. And so I took that letter home to my mom. And my mom, I remember this so vividly as I opened the door to our apartment. She's sitting on the couch watching her Bollywood movies. She's drinking her chai tea. And I walked in and I had this letter in my hand. And I was so excited about it. I waved it up and down. Mom, you got to read this letter. You got to read this letter. And she just stops. She turns to me and she says, Wali, what is that? A suspension letter? I said, no, Mom, for real. You have to read this letter. She says, okay, give me 5 minutes. Now, whenever an immigrant parent says 5 minutes, they mean 2 hours. And I remember waiting at the table for my mom to come over. And when she came over, I put the letter in front of her. And I said, Mom, this is for you. This is a small token of my appreciation. So my mom starts reading this letter. And by the time she's finished reading that letter, there are these big tears in my mother's eyes. And honestly, for the first few seconds, I really did not know what to say. Because in those tears, I saw so many memories. I saw the tears of being arrested in front of her. I saw the tears outside the TTC that day. You know, I saw the tears when she was leaving her family on our first visit to Pakistan to come back. You know, I saw the tears of so many moments. But these were finally happy tears. These were the tears of, I did all of these things. I sacrificed all of these moments for this. And that's when it all made sense to me. And what made sense to me was that I need to say thank you. And that's what I said. I said, thank you, Mom, for everything you've done, for every sacrifice you've made, for every moment you put your children first. You put your family first before even yourself. And this is a small token of my gratitude. And I gave my mom a huge hug. And I remember in that moment when I hugged her, when we both were crying, I thought to myself, it's not just my mom that I need to thank, but it's all the people in my life that have made a contribution towards getting me to this point. It's that counselor. It's my teacher. It's peers that I had that really did care about me and my future and my success, not the ones that wanted to bring me down or lead me astray. These were the people that deserve to thank you in my life. And appreciation goes such a long way. And I have to say that thank you. And today I want to extend that thank you to all of you. I know that many of you work with very vulnerable individuals in our communities. Many of you work with immigrants directly. You know, there's a lot of people that are struggling, especially post-COVID-19. I think that struggle has been so much further exacerbated. And the work that you're doing is making a huge difference in the lives of kids that really look a lot like me, that have names like mine, that have stories and narratives just like the ones I told you. It's for those kids that I want to say thank you on all of their behalfs, because it goes such a long way. And so fast forward, 5 years later, I graduated from U of T. I got my degree, paid up my $45,000 in tuition, went broke, the whole 9 yards. And I really enjoyed my time as a university student. And even when I graduated, when I was walking across Convocation Hall, U of T downtown, my mom and dad are sitting in the top row somewhere. And I remember when I came down and I gave them my degree, the first thing my mom said, she said, okay, listen, you're not getting off the hook now, Wali. You may have gotten your bachelor's degree, but I'm not going to stop pestering you until you get the PhD. And I said, Mom, listen, I don't think it's going to happen unless it's an honorary one. So you're going to have to settle for this. But my mom was very cool about it. She's joking and she knows that, academics are great, but it's not really my strong suit. I'm more of an artist. And we've had such great moments, throughout this journey where the struggles have really been real, but the moments of payoff, the moments of finally breaking through have been so rewarding for our family. And so, as the years go by, as I get older, I can really appreciate everything that we've gone through. And one thing that I really want to bring it back to, if I could sort of summarize all this in sort of one sentence or one sentiment, it would be that it really takes darkness to appreciate the light. It really takes struggle to appreciate growth. Almost as if to say that you have to have difficulty in your life in order for growth to occur. And I say that because I think about my own character development, so to speak, right? And what the journey has been like, what the universe or what God has put me through, so to speak, right? And that has not been an easy journey by any means for myself and my family, but it was necessary. It was a necessary journey so that I could be here and I could do this. I could speak on this issue about the reality of immigrant narratives to the people in our community, to my friends, to my coworkers, you know, to people like yourselves. And I think that's why. That's why I went through all this. This is why it matters. But if I hadn't gone through the struggle, then I never would have gotten here. And if you're, regardless of whether you're an immigrant or not, I think every single person in this world can relate to that exact sentiment because we all go through our own individual challenges and struggles. And they do one of two things to us. It either makes us bitter and resentful. Why am I going through this? Why was I placed in this hardship? Why was I placed in this difficulty? And you have every right to ask that question, and it can be very difficult to see the light at the end of the tunnel. So I get it. But that's the first thing it can do to you. The second thing, however, especially when you have the right people in your corner, whether it's the community resources, whether it's teachers, the counselors, good peer group, the second thing that it can do for you is it can make you completely change. It'll be the catalyst for your transformation. You'll be going through something difficult, and instead of saying, why am I going through this? You'll start asking, what can I learn from this? That's what makes a good artist. That's what makes a good counselor. That's what makes a good teacher. Because now you have amazing lived experience that you can pull from to share with others. That's why we're here, to share our stories, to talk about what we've gone through. Because there's others that are going through the same thing, and maybe they need our assistance, insight, support, guidance, art, right? That's why I create poetry. That's why I write. And I'm working on my first book that's coming out in March of next year, right? All of these things have come together because of those struggles. And so I want to share one more poem with you, and then I'll end it off with a few remarks after this poem. But I hope you guys have enjoyed this so far, and you guys have, you know, sort of gotten thinking a little bit. And we'll have a few minutes for questions after I'm done. But I did want to give you guys the opportunity. If you guys have any questions for me, feel free to drop them in the chat. And then Jody, when the time is right, she'll relay some of those questions to me. But I hope you guys enjoyed so far. And I want you guys to read along for this last piece that I'm going to share. And I think it's really super up the alley of what I've just been talking to you all about in terms of perspective. So can I just get a thumbs up if you guys can see my screen right now? There's a bunch of text on the screen. Or Jody, can you just let me know if you can? I actually can't see thumbs up while I'm sharing my screen. So if you want to just like verbally, you can see it, right? Okay, perfect. So I'm going to share this poem with you all. I want you to follow along with the text very carefully, because if you don't, you're going to miss a very crucial part of what I've written here. So this poem is called Dear Humanity. And here's how it goes. Humanity, with love and respect. It's time to give up. Not a single person feels that keeping our distance has brought us closer. Racism will always exist. You're wrong to assume that people have changed. Life lessons won't matter when we look back at missed opportunities. The disaster we were in made us forget about doing random acts of kindness, because our individual desire takes priority over a greater good for all. 2020 made it clear. Things won't be better in coming years. You're mistaken if you believe faith is stronger than fears. Wearing a mask is pointless. And I'd be crazy if I said, I'm alive today because of you. But now, let's read this in reverse and see a different point of view. I'm alive today because of you. And I'd be crazy if I said wearing a mask is pointless. Faith is stronger than fears. You're mistaken if you believe things won't be better in coming years. 2020 made it clear. A greater good for all takes priority over our individual desire. Because doing random acts of kindness made us forget about the disaster we were in. Missed opportunities won't matter when we look back at life lessons. People have changed. You're wrong to assume that racism will always exist. Keeping our distance has brought us closer. Not a single person feels that it's time to give up. With love and respect, humanity. Thank you, everyone. I hope you enjoyed that last spoken word poem. This poem is called a palindrome. And one of the beautiful things about this is that it can be read in both a conventional read and a reverse order. Writing something like this is incredibly difficult. It took me about 2 weeks to put this entire poem together. But the beautiful thing about it is it illustrates the point that I was just trying to make very clearly in a very artistic way. And this is why art is powerful. Because you can see in that first conventional read, it's a very negative poem. The sentiment is extremely pessimistic. And there's some truth to that pessimism as well. But it gives you this like very overbearing and harsh feeling about the world. But the second you flip the read, even though the words don't change at all, you just look at it differently. Everything is different. Now it's optimistic. It's leaving you with a hopeful and positive, uplifting message. Now, when I share this with kids at schools, they lose their minds. Like, it is so cool to watch the reactions from the first half going to the second half and how they react. But here's what I want to leave you with. This poem is a reflection of not only the conversation we just had, but of everything that we will ever go through in our lives. COVID-19 is a really good example because it was a collective experience we all suffered through. But again, I'll reiterate the main message. You choose how you want to handle something, especially when it's difficult. What is your perspective on it? Why am I going through this? Or what can I learn from this? And how we deal with people and how we deal with youth that are struggling and at risk, immigrants that don't know what to do when they come to this country, how we deal with even our personal, relationships, colleagues. How do we deal with people? Who do we become as a result of the struggles and the difficulties that are around us? They are what shape us. And I firmly believe that it's the people that have gone through the most difficulty, the people that have gone through the most struggle, that have the most valuable lessons to share and give back. And we can all do that because everyone goes through something. So I want to leave you with that message of optimism, of sharing your own personal stories, of remembering why we do this and why our perspective matters so much, no matter who we are, no matter what we do, whether we're parents, whether we're friends, whether we're volunteers, whether we're working for the government, whatever, or teachers, whatever it is, always comes down to perspective. And so I hope you enjoyed this presentation. I hope you enjoyed the poetry that I shared. I want to take a few minutes just to open it up for some Q&A. So I'm going to pass it back to Jody. I hope there's been some questions in your chat so far, but I'd love to take a few questions from the audience.
Wali, I don't even have the words to share how inspiring and absolutely how grateful I feel. And I think I can speak for our attendees for having you to share your story, to have the vulnerability to share your story with us today. And so as we transition into our Q&A portion with Wali, just again, a couple housekeeping items. So if you have any questions, we want you to we encourage you rather to pop them into the Feedloop chat, which is to the right of your Zoom window in the virtual event platform. And we do have a couple questions. So our first question is, The topics that you write about include mental health and social change. What is the most urgent or important change that you'd like to see in society right now?
Wow, that's a great question. I think resiliency and grit, really working on our perseverance. And this is really tough for me because, you know, I'm personally going through a lot myself. I'll be very, very upfront and honest with you. 2 months ago, my father was involved in a very, very horrible motorcycle accident where he was riding on the QEW, and he's been riding for his whole life. But just another morning, going to work on his motorcycle, and he was struck by a driver. And he's been in the hospital for the past 2 months. But life doesn't stop, right? You still gotta go to work. You gotta take care of your family. You gotta do whatever you gotta do to make sure things are getting done. And again, this is the dad that gave up everything for his kids. Worked 12-hour shifts 6 days a week for his kids to have a roof over his head. And now I see him in the hospital and he's now in a vegetative state and we don't know what's gonna happen. Resilience, grit, perseverance are necessities to deal with this world. Necessities. Because it is a cruel world. And you are going to face difficulty and challenge. No one gets out of this world scratch-free. Not a single person. Everyone will go through something, sooner or later. But it's not about what you go through that defines you. It's about how you respond to it that defines you. And again, this goes back to what I just said. What is your perspective? Do I look at the situation that happened to my dad and say, okay, well, I'm the eldest son. Now I got to step up. This is a huge hindrance to my own personal life. Do I say that? Why me? Or do I say, no, it's an honor to be my father's son. And it's an honor to take care of him the way that he took care of me in a very poetic way when I was vulnerable, when I was young, when I didn't have anything, right? No awareness or anything. That's almost like completely poetic, parallel in a sense. And that takes resilience. That takes grit. It takes faith. It takes believing. And I think we really need to practice that. And it's one of those things I think is learned. You go through it and you continue to develop it. Similar to the way I can use a metaphor, almost, again, poetic, right? A muscle, human biology, this is in your body, right? A muscle. Anyone here work out? Raise your hand if you go to the gym, run, work out, whatever. Anyone in this room? Okay, great. Me too. So human biology, right? A muscle has to be broken down before it can go stronger. And effectively, when you put pressure on that muscle, the fibers break, they tear, and through rest, recovery, diet, they grow back stronger. This is human biology. Now, if that's the truth with your muscles in your body, don't you think it's the truth with everything else you're going to go through? I think so. So the struggles that we go through are meant to make us stronger. This informs how I will be as a man going forward. How do I deal with further trauma and loss of a loved one in years to come? It's inevitable. I will lose my mom. I will lose my dad. How will I react to it then? This is helping me define that moment. And so resiliency, perseverance, and grit, especially in our younger generation, is absolutely essential. And that's why I do presentations to schools and kids all over Canada. I'm doing a presentation actually in a few hours here in Calgary. That's why I'm here, to a bunch of youth in a very low-income neighborhood here in Northeast Calgary, where there is a lot of immigrants in this community. A lot of people that come from communities like where I've come from, and they lack that. They don't have good role models or good resources, right? So again, I think a lot of this comes down to, I think, two things that really were important to me building my resilience and my grit. Well, one, a great group of people around me. Who's that teacher? Who's that counselor? Who's in that peer group? And second, finding an outlet for yourself, right? Substance abuse is so common. It's easy to lean on alcohol as a crutch or any other substance, but that will often just add a whole list of problems to your existing issues. It's a short-term solution to them. And we see a lot of people go to that short-term solution because they don't know what else to do. But when you have something like poetry or going to the gym, working out, you've got a healthy way of putting this out into the world and letting it out. And I think that's a great way to build your perseverance and build your personal grit. So I think this is something that will really be a game changer for people in the future, especially with, again, COVID-19 and everything that's been going on in our world with mental illness. And we really need strong grit, strong resilience, and perseverance. I'll leave it at that. Any other questions?
Absolutely. So you've mentioned working with youth and working in schools. So with your current work in schools, your focus is on making poetry accessible to students. Can you tell us a little bit more how you do that, and what the student experience is like?
Yeah, so I think two things. One is poetry is kind of like a dead art form for a lot of kids. They don't know what it is, right? Or they liken it to Shakespeare and they're like, what is this, right? But when you come in as a young person and you make it cool, then there's interest. It's almost like, whoa, that's like hip hop music. Oh, that's cool. I listen to hip hop music. Okay, cool. I can relate to that a little bit. So that's the first bit of it, right? The second bit of it, I love this art form because it is almost entirely financially accessible. Right. So if you want to put your kid into a hockey program, not everyone can do that. You have to come from a certain level of privilege for your kids to play hockey. Because you need skates, you need ice time, you need the helmet, you need the pads. That's not cheap. It costs well over $1,000 just to get the equipment for a kid to play. But for creative writing, to do a writing workshop or a writing program, you need two things. You need a piece of paper and a pencil, all which cost less than $1. That equals the playing field. Now, every single person can participate as long as they understand language. That's why I love this, because I can go to an inner city school in Calgary or in Toronto or in Vancouver or wherever, and I can do some really good work that virtually everyone can participate in. And that is a good feeling. So here we are now. I've been doing this for about, 7, 8 years at this point, hundreds of schools all across North America, all provinces in Canada, few states in the States. And it's just been such a rewarding experience. And I love what I do. I really do love working with young people and teaching creative writing, talking about the power of creative writing. And some of the most powerful stories have come out in some of these workshops. About 3 weeks ago, I was in Thunder Bay, Ontario, notorious community for substance abuse and crime. And I'm in a youth detention center. Most of these kids are in there for murder. So I'm sitting across convicted murderers, right, in their early 20s or in their late teens. And we're doing a writing workshop. And some of the things that come out, the stories of regret, stories of I wish I could go back and tell my mom I'm sorry. It's just incredible, the narratives that I got to hear that day and what those kids wrote about. This is the power in creative writing. And I'll leave it at this, but one other thing is that you can take creative writing in so many directions, right? What one person writes could end up becoming song lyrics, or could end up becoming a script for a TV show, right? It can end up becoming an essay and used in academia. There's so many different avenues that come from creative writing that I just think are beautiful, because no matter who you are, you can take it in so many different ways. I might do a workshop, but what comes of that, the door that opens for that student at the end of the day can lead to so many different avenues, which is incredible. So I'll leave it at that. Any other questions?
There are. So what made you want to highlight racism and anti-racism initiatives in your poetry?
Just because I've been through it. I know, going through it personally, having that experience, with my family, with myself, I thought that was important to me, And I think when we really think about it, it's social issues like this that art has always shed a light on. It's almost like the duty and the role of an artist to be able to create something that pushes the envelope a little bit on issues that affect our communities. And so because this was really personal to me, I really wanted to shed light on it. And so the book that I have coming out in March of 2024, it's slated for publishing. I've got a publisher in Victoria, BC called Orca Books. They picked up my book, and we're really excited. And it's a book about a young immigrant kid who comes from Pakistan and is struggling to find his way. So loosely based off my story, but I did write it with another writer. His name is Eric Walters, and Eric has written hundreds of children's books in Canada. And so the really interesting thing about the story is that we tackle racism through the protagonist's best friend. And his best friend is a white kid from, where is he from? I forgot where he's from, somewhere in Northern Ontario. And his name is Zach. So through the eyes of Zach, we see how racism affects the main character, Ali. And they end up working through it together. And I think that's a beautiful thing. You know, so this is where it's led me to. And I think this is the type of thing that when kids read, they'll see themselves represented. Not just the ones that look like Ali or myself, but also the ones that look like Zach. And how we can all come together and sit at the same table and learn from each other.
Do you ever just take a moment and reflect on where you started and where you are now? This is just my question. Where you started and where you are now, and like, how do you know, what do those feels, how do you process those feelings?
I think I do sit with my mom quite a bit and have this conversation about our humble beginnings. I often reflect in my faith as well, and I try to talk to the Creator when I have that personal relationship. I start every morning with a prayer and reflection and in gratitude. Every single morning for the last 372 mornings, I've started in prayer, and I feel really emotional some days, but I also am reminded that this is a responsibility for me. That if I've been given a platform, if I've been given a position, if I've been given a talent, as everyone in this call has been, what do we do with that, right? What do we do with that power that we have? That often comes down to the question of responsibility. How do we use that power for good and effectively trying to make a difference in the lives of others? And I think that's where this has led me to. It really feels more like I was called to serve in a way, you know, and the powers that be had their hands on my shoulders, or were the footsteps in the sand, you know, for a lot of days. And even when it was storming, and even when it was dark, you know, those footsteps carried me through. So I reflect on that quite often. But I'm here for a reason. We all are here for a reason, and I think that reason is service to others and humanity.
And our last question. There's a lot of the people who are in this space with us, excuse me, in the virtual space with us here today, who are working in anti-racism initiatives. So for those who support those types of initiatives, but are maybe overwhelmed or exhausted or feeling a little defeated, what would you say to them?
I feel you. and I hear that. I hear that. I think what I'd say is thank you. I'd extend the thank you that I gave my mom that day many years ago for what you do. And you know, the other thing I'd say is that it takes time. It takes time. Now, I might be able to be really eloquent and share my story with you today, this morning, in great detail, and share my art with you. But 10 years ago, that wasn't a reality. I wouldn't know where to start 10 years ago in terms of sharing that story. I would not have had the courage to be that vulnerable and step forward. What you're building will take time. What you're doing will take time. There is no overnight success. And if it is, it crumbles just as quickly. And so every good thing, you know, that seed that you plant and water, it will take years. but eventually it will grow into a tree that will bear fruit and provide shade to others. You have to believe in that long-term vision. And that's what I constantly remind myself too. There's times I get down on myself as well, and I compare myself to others, and I think, oh, I could be doing more, and I should be doing more, and why am I not doing more? And my mom still wants me to get that PhD, and I haven't gotten it yet, right? But we can always look at others and compare ourselves, or always think we could be doing more. But I think it's also important to stop to smell the flowers and remember that it's a process, and that's where I'm at, and I think that's where I'd leave it with you guys too. And the work that you're doing matters so much. There's a kid out there that looks just like me that hasn't said thank you yet, but if you give it a few years and you keep watering that flower or that fruit or that tree, that thank you will come, and it will be worth it that day. And I remember saying thank you to that teacher when so I got a chance very, very quickly. I got a chance to perform for President Barack Obama prior to COVID. I had a corporate organization that hired me to write a poem, particularly for this event. So I'd written a poem that Obama would walk off stage and I would come on stage and I would close out the event. So front and center at that event where Obama was at, guess who's sitting there? Miss Riley, my grade 11 English teacher, sitting right there with my family. That thank you will come. It will take time. It will not be overnight, but that thank you and that moment where it all comes full circle will come if you believe and you have that perspective and that perseverance. It came from Miss Riley that day and for us in our personal journey together. And I still keep in touch with it to this day. But these are the moments that you're doing this for. It will take time. I'll leave it at that. Jody, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate your time this morning. I want to say thank you everyone for indulging me for the last almost 50 minutes or so. I appreciate your time. I hope you enjoyed yourselves and you enjoyed the poetry and the stories. Thank you very much for listening. If you'd like to take another look at some of my work, you can find me across all social media platforms. It's at Life as Wali. So yeah, I look forward to seeing you guys in person at the next event if there is one. But thank you for having me, Jody.
Thank you. The thanks goes to you. And before we close our keynote session, I want to borrow some of the words from our chat here. Wali, listening to you today, I laughed and I cried. You opened up my heart and mind to a better understanding of the realities of immigrants. And I think that those words really kind of bear a lot of weight to how we're all feeling right now. So thank you for being here. And
thank you.